Itulah guys ya, seharusnya kita dapat sedikit menurunkan rasa egois kita ya, untuk mencontoh hal yang benar, mencontoh hal yang baik dari Malaysia. Dari video ini saja kita dapat melihat ya guys ya. Coba kita pikirkan guys ya, dari Anda, coba Anda pikirkan ya. Jika ada seperti ini di Kuala Lumpur ya, apa jadinya Malaysia ya 5 hingga 10 tahun ke depan? Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Halo guys, senang sekali hari ini berjumpa lagi bersama saya Indra SFN yang tentunya akan selalu menyapa Anda semua di sana. Semoga dalam keadaan baik-baik saja, sehat senantiasa, jasmani juga rohaninya, serta segala bentuk pekerjaan, kegiatan, aktivitas apapun yang kita lakukan diberikan juga kelancaran dan kemudahan oleh Tuhan Yang Maha Kuasa. Amin amin ya robbal alamin. Baik guys, di sini ada satu video yang menarik menurut saya ya. Ini terkait tentang orang asing ya, terkait tentang pengusaha besar dari Amerika. Nah, pengusaha ini ya mengaku sudah menanamkan investasi atau bisnisnya ke berbagai negara, negara maju, negara berkembang ya guys ya. Semua ada bisnisnya di negara-negara itu guys. Sudah banyak sekali. Tapi guys ya, dia mengaku bahwa antara banyak negara tersebut, bisnisnya yang ada di Malaysia lah yang paling maju dan berkembang pesat guys ya. Nah, sekarang tentu ada alasan yang besar ya, rahasianya mengapa Malaysia ini lebih menonjol daripada negara-negara lain ya untuk bisnisnya. Dan dia di sini mengakui bahwa ya domisili ya, tempat ia tinggal ya, itu selain di Amerika itu adalah Malaysia guys. Selama seumur hidupnya Malaysia dan Amerika adalah tempat tinggal dia yang paling lama. Nah, dia juga mengaku ada satu keanehan tentang orang-orang Islam di Malaysia. Nah, kita tahu bahwa Malaysia adalah salah satu negara ya yang mayoritasnya Islam terbesar juga, guys ya. Tapi dia di sini mengakui bahwa Islam yang ada di Malaysia itu sangat berbeda daripada Islam yang ada di negara-negara lainnya seperti Arab Saudi, Mesir, Turki, ya, Uni Emirat Arab dan lain-lainnya. Dia mengatakan Malaysia inilah yang memiliki Islam yang berbeda. Nah, apa maksudnya guys ya? Islam yang berbeda. Padahal secara garis besar, Islam itu kan sama ya guys ya. Namun dia mengaku bahwa Islam yang ada di Malaysia ini sangat berbeda. Oke, di sini kita akan mendengar langsung ya. Dan juga melihat ya keterangan dari penjelasan dia secara real, secara lengkap ya. Apa saja yang akan dia katakan ya terkait tentang kenyamanannya yang ada di Malaysia. Oke, tanpa banyak berbasa-basi ya, kita akan saksikan video itu. Jom.
Malaysia is the best value place in the world for someone who wants to easily adapt to a new place at an affordable price and have lots of different options.
This is Andrew Henderson, an investor and serial entrepreneur, also known as the nomad capitalist. He told me why Malaysia offers the best lifestyle, the biggest misconceptions Americans have about Malaysia, and the most promising countries to live and invest in for the next 10 years. I'm Max, and if I want, I can be in Malaysia in just 30 minutes. Let's go!
I think Malaysia is kind of the longest place that I've lived overseas. I have a small house which I use for when my team comes into town, and I have a kind of a proper family, condominium that I live in. Yeah, and I'm a big believer in it. I think Malaysia 10 years from now could be a growth investment. Right now, it's flat at best, but I believe in owning real estate. I think it's great asset diversification. You're moving your assets into different jurisdictions. And I appreciate that more and more as I become more and more successful in business and I see some of the craziness that successful people deal with. I think, having stuff in different places is good. Exposing yourself to different markets is good. And Malaysia, you're in Singapore. For me, if I can live anywhere in the world, obviously Singapore has a bit more development. I don't think Malaysia is that bad, especially in the places that I go. But it is, 1/5 the price of even some of the cheaper European cities per square meter, and much, much, much cheaper than Singapore with none of the taxes on real estate. That's why I did it.
I have a lot of friends in Malaysia and in Thailand and Bangkok, and we compare the prices. Okay, the Singapore is unbeatable, so the price for real estate just insane. But then even if you compare KL, Kuala Lumpur, and Bangkok, the price difference is 2 times.
If you buy in Kuala Lumpur, okay, I'm more of a city center guy. I know there's certain expat hubs, Bangsa, Mankiara. People live further out, what have you. What did I pay? $1,300 a meter for a property that's ready to go, and I just touch it up. Renovations are pretty affordable. A lot of stuff is produced either locally or regionally. You can't compare that. I mean, I had a friend in Bangkok, he just sold a property for $5,000 a meter. Now, his property was smaller than mine. I think that there's probably a bit of an oversupply or less of an interest, maybe more so, in these larger, 3 to 4,000, 5,000 square foot properties in Malaysia, where you can get them very affordably. But, I don't have the intention of selling properties, generally speaking. If I'm looking to buy long term, you can pay fairly low prices in Kuala Lumpur. And for someone who's adjusting, yes, they have more Michelin star restaurants and that kind of stuff in Thailand, but I think the culture is an easier adjustment in Malaysia. I think that people are some of the nicest in Malaysia.
Can you own a property in Malaysia as a foreigner?
You can own property. I mean, you can own property in most Asian countries. You can own condominiums. Malaysia is one of, I think, 4 countries in Asia where you can actually own the land. And so I have a friend who is American who is building a villa, and you got a couple of friends together. They each bought land. They're building villas. They're going to pool their resources and hire a couple security guards to guard their 5 villas. Yeah, you can actually own land. Malaysia and Japan, and I think parts of South Korea. That's pretty rare in Asia that a foreigner can own land, but you can in Malaysia.
I just bought a property, the condo in Phuket, and it's basically, so it's either leasehold or freehold, so it's a bit tricky. So you can own it properly, but it's more complicated than Malaysia.
In Thailand, they were going to have a law where if it's like 1.3 million US roughly, if you were to invest that much, then they would let you on land, and they were trying to open it up. But I think they pulled back on some of that stuff. So I'm not anti-Thailand. I mean, I have a lot of great friends in Thailand. I mean, stock market's gotten beaten up. I'm kind of interested in the stock market recently, but in Thailand. But I just think for a lifestyle. Now, people want to wrap everything into one wrapper. Malaysia for me is lifestyle. I would argue I get 85 to 90% of what I would get in Singapore based on how you actually live. You don't go to a Michelin star restaurant every day. So you don't get to count all the extra Michelin star restaurants is worth that much more. For the way that I live, I want to have a club. I want to have a place to go and sit. I want to be able to go to a nice, hotel bar, that kind of thing. I want to be able to go to a nice coffee shop and have a nice mall and just have, whatever. I think I get 85 to 90% of what I would get in Malaysia or in Singapore. In Malaysia. I am not looking at my property in Malaysia. It's some amazing growth prospects. I have properties that have gone up quite a bit in value. My Malaysian properties are not those, but I like the place and I'm willing to take some cash off the table to fund a lifestyle that I very much like, because I happen to think when you feel good in life, you're much more productive in your business and all your other pursuits. It's worth taking a little bit of cash off the table, especially at the low prices in Malaysia, to not have to have that be a big return. I own a couple of REITs, real estate investment trusts in Malaysia for fun. Just, I've always liked the Petronas Towers since I was 13 years old. All right, I'll own the REIT that owns the Petronas Towers. We have our event Nomad Capitalist Live at the Majestic Hotel. That's owned by a REIT. Well, let me buy that REIT just for kind of sentimental reasons. I like the hotel. I'm not, and it pays good yields, tax-free yield. But otherwise, I'm not investing in Malaysia on a big level. I would keep a lot of my money in Singapore. Just talk to my banker, as I said, in Singapore today. That's where I would keep a lot more assets. And then I would be investing more exotically in places like Cambodia. So, and I think Nepal is coming up. Bangladesh might be a next one. When people hear move to Malaysia, they probably think, move everything. Oh, do you trust the banks? I actually do trust the banks, but it's not the best banking for like a global citizen, for a nomad capitalist. You want everything to fit its piece.
So you're advocating often for Malaysia. What do you think other countries don't get about Malaysia? Let's say America. What's the misconception about Malaysia?
I guess it's a Muslim country. That's the one that's thrown out there. I mean, so I don't spend a lot of time in Turkey, but I have a home in Turkey because it's a layover point for me. And I bought when things were incredibly cheap. You walk around my neighborhood in Istanbul, it's incredibly international. It doesn't look like a Muslim country. I'm sure if you go to whatever Turkey's Alabama is, it seems more like Alabama would. It seems more isolated. And so I'm sure the same thing is true about Malaysia. We had our event last year, and we have various people who are coming. We had, we do have a number of gay clients, and they asked us, what should they expect? I said, you should expect nothing, because they don't care. And if you ask and some of them did, they're like, oh yeah, okay. We asked. And they said, for us as Malay Muslims, we have an agreement. We have a belief in what we should do for God. You have your own God. That's your business.
Oke, sedikit saya ingin bercerita guys ya, bahwa itulah guys ya, seharusnya kita dapat sedikit menurunkan rasa egois kita ya, untuk mencontoh hal yang benar. mencontoh hal yang baik dari Malaysia. Dari video ini saja kita dapat melihat ya guys ya. Ini adalah satu kesan ya, satu hal yang positif yang dapat kita ambil ya. Nah, kalau dari negara manapun, bukan hanya saja dari negara Malaysia, hal-hal baik itu dapat kita ambil dari manapun ya. Termasuk dari negara Malaysia, banyak hal yang positif dapat kita petik untuk kita ambil ya. Kita raih bersama, kita capai untuk kemajuan negara kita. Kita lihat ya, kesimpulan dari video yang telah ia katakan yaitu adalah begitu mudahnya regulasi ya yang telah ditetapkan yang membuat para investor asing masuk ke negara Malaysia begitu sangat dipermudah. Jadi itu ramai sekali orang berdatangan untuk ya, berinvestasi di negara Malaysia, sehingga dampaknya apa? Itu dapat membuat negara Malaysia akan semakin maju lagi daripada negara-negara yang ada di tetangganya guys ya. Karena hal itu sangat terlihat dominan dari banyaknya investor asing yang tidak perlu berpikir 100 kali untuk masuk dan berinvestasi ke negara Malaysia. Ini fakta guys. Oke, kita lanjutkan lagi.
Business, we're not going to bother you. And so even other Malaysians, people drink, people dress more provocatively, from the Chinese, the Indian, Malaysian, the expats. Nobody cares. It is not, listen, we had Zubi at last year's event. Zubi grew up in Saudi Arabia before some of the reforms. He said even Saudi Arabia is not the Saudi Arabia you think, but Malaysia is nowhere near that. It's just an incredibly open, warm place. People leave you alone. They don't bother you. I think that's a good thing. And I'll tell you what, when I met my wife, she came and she said, coming from Russia, she says, I remember complaining when I got my residence permit, like that woman was a little grouchy. She's like, that's a back massage in Moscow. If that's the worst service they have here. And she's right. They weren't like rude. It was just a little grouchy. Kindness was the thing. She's like, I've never seen such kind people. Optimize for kindness in your life. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why a place like the US is going the wrong direction. People have stopped optimizing for kindness. That's incredibly important to me. The rest of it, I think, is just people don't know what it is. And people, my identity is as an entrepreneur. I meet people, as I'm sure you do, who come up to me and they say I've done various things. Like everything's on an individual level. And that shapes my beliefs. I don't owe the United States anything. I paid them plenty of taxes in the years that I lived there. More than enough to pay for whatever schooling I got. I'm successful. You're successful because of how we were raised by our families, because of our own personal drive, our own ambition. I think in the same way, that should govern the way that you live in some other country. That's why I'm a big fan of it.
I love Malaysia. I go to KL pretty often. The only thing I don't like is the airport. So I love to come to Changi, super efficient. Yeah, but KL airport is like as a hub. I would even love to have it as a hub, but it's a little bit painful to go through the airport. I don't know, maybe you have different experience.
Well, out of all the airports in all the world, compared to Europe, where you land, I landed in Lisbon not that long ago, and they're like, a business class gets off last because that's part of the deal, because we have to be egalitarian. I think any Asian airport will beat most of the rest of the world's airports. Look at some of the airports in the U.S. Even look at, as much as I love Mexico City, look at their airport. That's a real dump. Now, the KL airport is further away from the city than Changi. It's not as nice as Changi. It's the Malaysian version of, it's to me, it's 15 or 20% less. The bags do take longer, but what my goal is try to be with having, 7 homes around the world, and having that kind of allocation to real estate in my personal portfolio is, I don't travel with luggage. So for me, that's easy. For me, as a residence permit holder in Malaysia, I'm in and out very quickly. I go through the short queue. So the things that maybe might bother other people, yes, the queues with tourism coming back up, the queues for economy passengers who are just tourists, they're getting a little bit long. I don't deal with that. I don't carry bags. They're super friendly to me. The last time I was in Singapore, they had this form you've got to fill out. They were super nice about it, but Malaysia doesn't even do that stuff to me now. So I get the Changi. Changi's in a class of its own. You know what I don't like about Changi and KL both is security at the gate. Belgrade and Serbia also did that, and they got rid of it when they renovated the airport. KL and Changi, I think, are the only ones left where you have to have the anxiety of going through security right before you board the plane.
I think it's a mind of things. It's like...
Baik, demikian tadi video yang baru saja kita reaksi. Coba kita pikirkan guys ya. Dari Anda, coba Anda pikirkan ya. Jika ada 3 atau 4 ribu investor seperti ini di Kuala Lumpur ya, apa jadinya Malaysia ya 5 hingga 10 tahun ke depan. Saya yakin ini akan dapat melebihi pencapaian dari Singapura. Itu tidak terlalu sulit ya bagi para investor ini. Jika udah ada 1.000 hingga 3.000 mereka masuk ke Kuala Lumpur, maka kita akan ketinggalan jauh guys. Bahkan Singapura pun akan dapat dilampaui ya dengan tidak begitu susah ya guys ya. Ini fakta ya. Nah, kenapa hal itu terjadi? Karena ada regulasi, lagi-lagi ini guys ya, ini hal yang sangat penting tentang adanya aturan atau regulasi ya yang ditetapkan di satu negara yang memudahkan bagi mereka untuk masuk dan berinvestasi di negara Malaysia, dan juga mereka sudah membayang-bayang tentang keuntungan ya apabila mereka akan membuka usaha tersebut di negara Malaysia, dan juga akan dijelaskan tentang resikonya. Tentu lebih minim resiko yang terjadi dan lebih besar laba yang akan didapatkan di negara Malaysia. Nah, hal ini pula lah yang membuat banyak sekali turis dan juga investor masuk negara Malaysia untuk membuka usaha mereka, berinvestasi. Nah, inilah tentu yang sangat diinginkan semua negara untuk meningkatkan kualitas perekonomian ya dan juga perdagangan di negara itu guys ya, termasuk Malaysia yang telah membuat satu kebijakan yang untuk mempermudah bagi investor turis asing untuk berinvestasi di sana. Buktinya apa guys? Buktinya bahwa ini satu investor mengatakan di Malaysia itu jauh lebih mudah untuk membuka atau berinvestasi daripada negara-negara lainnya. Nah, ini tentu sudah menjawab keraguan dari banyak orang untuk jika berinvestasi di Malaysia itu apa sih resikonya dan bagaimana keuntungannya. Ini sudah dijelaskan ya guys ya. Dan ini sudah menjadi bukti bahwa begitu besarnya Kuala Lumpur, begitu mewahnya Malaysia 5 hingga 10 tahun yang akan datang, ini ada peran penting juga dari para investor seperti ini guys ya. Mungkin hingga 40 atau 50% dari mereka akan lebih membuat Malaysia itu jauh lebih baik dan bahkan jauh melampaui negara-negara tetangga guys ya. Inilah yang terjadi. Mungkin lebih cepat 3 hingga 4 tahun mendatang. Oke, lagi demikian tadi video aku. Semoga video ini bermanfaat bagi kita semua, dan aku mohon undur diri. Mohon maaf jika ada kesalahan kata, kesalahan sikap aku kepada Anda semua, karena saya hanyalah manusia biasa yang tak luput dari kesalahan. Dan aku akhiri, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.